All right, Augustus Doricko joining me from, are you in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia right now, sir?
I am in Riyadh at this moment. It's my last day here.
All right, well, we'll talk about the region and the role you play there in a second. You are the founder and CEO of Rainmaker, a drone-powered cloud seeding company. Let's begin here. That is a very unique line of business. How did you find yourself in the business of literally making it rain?
I guess even before that, what even is cloud seeding, right? And simply put, it's making it rain and snow more for water supply, right? It's not making clouds. It's not making long streaky clouds in the sky behind airplanes. It's not dimming out the sun. It's just making more water, the same way that a desalination plant would make more water.
So basically, for cloud seeding to work, there has to be a cloud.
You need a big, puffy cloud full of water already.
Right. So it's not just any cloud. There are certain types of clouds that enable you to seed those clouds and then boost the rain output.
Exactly.
And so I want to get into that in a second here. But first, how did you find yourself in this line of business?
Yeah, a series of serendipitous events. So I was originally going to school at UC Berkeley. I was studying physics there, so I never dyed my hair blue or did the typical Berkeley thing, right? But I was studying until the pandemic hit. And once the pandemic hit, I moved from Berkeley to Texas just because Berkeley was a disaster. Texas was open. And I didn't know anybody in Texas besides my Nana. And so while I was doing school online, I was also a personal trainer at a gym nearby. And I lucked out and met the biggest water well driller in Texas. And so he and I co-founded a company that handled all of like your reporting and regulatory compliance if you're a groundwater user. So if you have to pump water as a farm or as a factory, you have to tell the state how much water you use. So we automated that, made it simple, scaled that business up, dropped out of college for it. And then once I sold that company at the beginning of 2023, every single customer I had just said, being able to measure how much water I use is great. I just wish that we had more water, right? My farm is running dry. The cost of water is going up. I wish that we had more. And, for these people in Dallas or these folks in Nebraska, Oklahoma, desalination is not an option. So I looked into different technologies to produce more water, searched far and wide, found atmospheric water condensation, a bunch of other stuff, and then cloud seeding. And cloud seeding on its face, increasing precipitation, terraforming, making deserts green, all super exciting to me. So I looked into it, but then what I realized was this stuff has existed for like 80 years in some form or another, right? The first cloud seeding was done in America, invented by American scientists in 1946. So my obvious question was like, well, is it even real, right? Like if this has been around for so long and it has so much potential, but it's not deployed, is that just because it doesn't work? And I realized the reason why it's not ubiquitous is because nobody's been able to measure what the results are until about 2023. And so what changed was people realized with the right kind of radar, you can measure exactly how much the precipitation is man-made, and then quantify what the value is to your end customer, your farmer. And so after I found that out, talked to a bunch of scientists, I decided to start Rainmaker in 2023.
So from a personal trainer to cloud seeding drones, in just a matter of years here, Augustus.
We've been turning and burning, man. God's been very good to me. I'm very grateful for all the opportunities I've had. A lot of smart people around me. So just all blessings.
So you just mentioned the history of cloud seeding going back to the 1940s. What did you discover in that time in terms of the major technological breakthroughs that we've made and why we're at where we're at today, where it's been 80-ish years and it still feels like this new experimental technology? I mean, was there a pause at some point? Were there major breakthroughs? Take us through the kind of recent history of this.
Yeah, totally. So like I said, it was invented in America. The scientists, Vincent Schaefer and Irving Langmuir, they realized that if you throw dry ice out of the back of a plane and there's a cloud with liquid water in it, you can freeze that water into snowflakes that'll fall down. That was the initial experiment. They took pictures of it.
Wait, so literally, so hold on, just to repeat that. So you're throwing dry ice out of a plane, it goes into the cloud, and then what happens to it in the cloud?
And so the dry ice freezes the water drops into snowflakes, and then those snowflakes become big enough and heavy enough to fall. And if it's warm beneath the cloud, that turns into rain. If it's cold, it stays as snow.
Got it.
So those were the very first experiments in 1946. Not long after, by the 60s, 70s, people realized, well, if I fly into a cloud and I sprinkle some magic beans in it, whether it's dry ice or some other material, and then it rains, that doesn't necessarily mean that I caused it to rain, right? Maybe I'm just really good at picking clouds that are going to precipitate already. And so we stopped funding the technology because we weren't sure how well it was working. So by the 1970s and 80s, it started to fall off in America. But You know who kept researching it? The Chinese. So the Chinese now, for the last 20, 30 years, they've been spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year on their cloud seeding program. They have 38,000 employees in the Beijing Weather Modification Office. They have two universities that offer weather engineering degrees. And so everybody knows, or at least a lot of people have heard about how they made it rain before the Beijing Olympics.
Yeah, I mean, that's the famous example in the 2008 Olympic Games.
Yep, exactly. And so not only do they do that, but they're turning the deserts on the border with Mongolia green from making more water via cloud seeding. They're filling up their dams and their reservoirs for all of their farmers and their hydroelectric and their industries via cloud seeding. So while America stopped investing in this and stopped researching this, the Chinese took the ball and ran with it. And they've largely imported that tech to Saudi Arabia now and the UAE and other states in the Middle East and Southeast Asia. But what really clicked, what made this a viable technology that, a capitalistic market, an American market can pay for rather than just some like state mandated program. And we don't know whether it works or not. It was the radar to measure how much of it is man-made, how much of the precipitation is man-made. And so it was in 2017 and then 2023 that American researchers out of Colorado realized if you have the right radar and you fly in a zigzag pattern and you only see the precipitation on a zigzag, then you know that's man-made precipitation. So that's the fundamental innovation.
Wait, explain that. What do you mean? Is the type of rain that's man-made come down differently than natural rain?
No. So it's indistinguishable from normal rain in terms of chemical composition. But the key difference is this. If I fly, in my case, a drone in a zigzag pattern, right, like this, and then on radar, I see precipitation in a zigzag, or if I fly in the shape of an MO, right, and you only see precipitation in the MO, then you know that that is man-made precipitation. That's the fundamental difference, is being able to measure how much precipitation happens in your flight track.
What have we discovered is the potential impact of cloud seeding? Say a storm cloud was going to drop 1.5 inches of rain. How much can you boost that by, and how does that calculation work?
I think the best way to think about it isn't how much can you boost a cloud that's already going to rain, but how many more clouds can you make rain that weren't going to rain naturally, right? So 93% of all of the liquid that traverses the atmosphere over the United States doesn't precipitate over the United States. It gets recycled by the oceans. So there's about 10 times more liquid up there that could be coming down that isn't. And so on a seeding by seeding basis, you're going to see about, what's that in gallons? Or let's do Olympic pools just so that we can ground it in like a measurement that makes sense. You're going to see about anywhere from 200 to like 10,000 Olympic pools of water come down from cloud seeding over tens of square miles.
Yeah, but putting that in terms that people like on the ground can take in, if I am in Nebraska and I have a farm and we're seeing increasingly in some plain states, it's getting drier and drier. How much of a difference can cloud seeding make in certain environments like that?
Well, I mean, simply put, like our mission, our goal is to save American farms from desertification, save them from the aquifers that are drying up. And cloud seeding, if you produce even 20% more water than what was there naturally, and I think we can push that way more, but 20% is like a very...
So 20% right now is the goal, that you can boost rain output or snow output by 20%.
That's something that's been reliably done, yeah.
Doing it by 20%, how much of a difference can that make given the climate change that's happening right now domestically?
I think a great point of context is like the same acre of land in Arizona, like in Kingston, Arizona, that you can't farm on right now because there's no water, would be valued as much as an acre of land in the Central Valley that you can put pistachios on because there is water there. That's the level of difference that you can see if you deploy this at scale. Like you can fundamentally terraform ecosystems.
So the Chinese have totally invested in this. They're big believers in this. What have you taken away so far about American reluctance, or how would you describe how the U.S. has approached this or not approached this until now, both on the government level, in the corporate level, but also how the public is feeling about it?
I think that it makes a lot of sense that people are cautious about this, that they regulate it. In all of the areas that we operate, we're regulated by the Departments of Natural Resources or the Departments of Environmental Protection in these different states. I understand why people don't want just anyone fussing with the weather. Like I actively advocate for more regulation so we make sure that everything's safe, and we have a bunch of procedures to make it safe.
Yeah, I mean, like, are there worst case scenarios here where if it's not regulated, you can create flooding and tornadoes. I mean, what is the extent to which geoengineering can impact things in a negative way?
So cloud seeding is different than geoengineering, just as a first point.
Okay.
Geoengineering is a global modification to the entire Earth's climate, right? So that's like solar radiation modification, dimming the sun to cool the planet down. Cloud
Right.
seeding,
And there's some theories around that, by the way, right? Related to climate change that like some people say we should just start dimming the sun to deal with
oh yeah, no,
climate change.
ton of people say that. That's real.
Yeah. Like Montgomery Burns in The Simpsons, like when he had his shield. I don't know if saw the episode
Yeah, yeah,
that he
yeah.
literally blocks the sun over Springfield. That's people's fear about. All right, so that's geoengineering. That is planetary changes.
Cloud seeding,
Okay.
on the other hand, it's localized both in space and time. You can stop it whenever you want. We have 80 years of data on its safety. One, there should be regulations in all these states. There are regulations in most of these states dictating who's allowed to operate, that the operations are safe. If there's risk of flooding, that you suspend operations. But I think the real worst case scenario isn't like poor regulation, because there is safe regulation in place now, like the Utah Department of Natural Resources or California, they regulate us. The worst case scenario is that one, American farmers and American industry and American cities don't have as much water as they could, and also China is the one that controls the weather fundamentally because they are exporting their tech all around the world. I would prefer that it's an American company serving American constituents and people around the world, like here in Saudi, rather than the CCP that controls precipitation enhancement.
Right, almost in the same way we're concerned about TikTok being a Chinese entity and them having control potentially of the algorithm. In the same way, having to buy their technology related to rain, there would always be that extra caution. Like, well, they have an incentive for it not to be as effective as it should be in America, given their politics and their foreign policy.
Or actively bad, right? Like it could be worse than not as effective as possible. It could be like TikTok, actively harming the American population if it's not regulated by the U.S. population.
Polluting, doing a variety of things, having a health impact on people. But in just so we can deal with people's concerns, some of the questions that I got from folks. Can you, like, if a pilot hits the wrong button and dumps too much in a cloud, is there the potential that like he could flood a certain area? Is there human error when it comes to what you do in terms of cloud seeding?
No, dude, our company would be a lot bigger if we could reliably make it flood. We can make it rain a bit more. We can make it snow a bit more. But we're a long ways away from huge scale induction or something like that.
Yeah, and I bring that up because as we were just getting started here, you noted you were in Saudi, and one of the big stories that got a lot of attention in the last couple of years was a flooding event, a very rare flooding event that happened neighboring over there in the UAE, and there were like various headlines about cloud seeding gone awry, and then they eventually walked that back. And so I think there is concern, like, oh well, didn't they accidentally flood the UAE by cloud seeding? What do you know about that particular situation, and how can you calm people's nerves on that front?
First of all, that cloud, that system, it was already going to rain naturally. That's evidenced by the fact that it didn't just rain in the UAE. It also rained in Oman and Iran and Saudi and Bahrain and Qatar. So that was already going to rain naturally. And if you think about the UAE, Dubai, it's a desert. They built the whole city assuming that there would be almost no rain. So every time it does rain, it floods because there's no drainage infrastructure. So first of all, it was already going to rain naturally. Second of all, every time it does rain, it sort of floods the city because they just don't have the infrastructure or the soil to retain the water. Whether they cloud seeded or not, they say no. What I can tell you is Rainmaker isn't contracted in the UAE. So if they did, it wasn't us.
Where right now are you guys working inside the U.S.? Where can we see and like, are there examples of success stories that you can already tell us about from what you guys are doing here domestically?
Yeah, so we're a relatively young company. We're about 2 years old, but I take our mission really seriously, right? Like I want to produce as much water as possible for American farmers for the sake of the Colorado River, our ecosystems that are dying, to refill our aquifers that are running out so that cities like Phoenix can build more housing because they're banning housing because there's not enough water right now.
Yeah, I mean, we have the Southwest in particular is a major challenge, and you have a bunch of states negotiating over the water that's coming from Colorado.
Yeah, and I'll answer your previous question, but to that point, right? California, the Central Valley of California, it used to be a desert and swampy wasteland, right? There was nothing there because there was no water. And then we built all of the requisite canals and storage to pump water throughout it. And it's one of the most green, lush, productive agricultural regions in the United States and
It's where we
world.
get the majority of our produce.
Exactly. Because we were tech forward, because we were adding more water to the supply. I think that cloud seeding is just the next iteration of how to produce and store water. Now, with respect to your question, where we're operating, we cloud seed for the state of Utah, Department of Natural Resources, the state of Colorado, multiple municipalities in Texas and California. And I think that in the state of Utah, the state estimates that we produce 186,000 acre feet of water per year. So for those that don't know what an acre foot is, it's 300,000 gallons, give or take. So that's about 6% of all the water that Utah consumes every year.
And is it regulated on a state by state level right now? Like, do states have various? Because I mean, I did see the headline in the last couple of weeks that Florida is going to be banning this sort of thing, right?
It's regulated on a state by state level, yes. You're technically required to submit a report to NOAA at the federal level about a notice to operate and your results. But frankly, it should be regulated much more intensively at the federal level, just so that one, people feel safe, and two, there is federal scrutiny to these programs. With respect to Florida, I think that it is understandable that people are worried about dimming the sun, right? I think it's understandable, and people don't know about cloud seeding, so they have some concerns that I'm happy to talk about always. But 30,000 acres in Florida burned down in April because of wildfire. Something that people don't realize is that there's droughts in Florida just the same as there are in the Southwest, even if they're not as common. And so by banning that tech, you're essentially depriving all of the cattlemen in Florida, all of the ranchers, all of the homes from getting access to the most cost-effective way to produce water.
Staying in Florida for a second, one, I know you got a lot of notes about this, and you watched the headlines last year as Hurricane Helene and Milton came through, and sort of social media blew up for the first time in my memory with people asking me legitimately, Moshe, does the government have the ability to create hurricanes? Can the government route hurricanes? I mean, it went from sort of the corners of the internet to like kind of mainstream social media. First things first, Augustus, do we have that power? And one thing that people pointed to were these experiments back in the 60s and 70s with silver iodide. So can you kind of give us the what can and cannot be done related to hurricanes and kind of fact check that for us?
Yeah. So there was Project Storm Fury, right, which was an attempt to suppress hurricanes over the Atlantic before they broke against the eastern seaboard.
This was the Pentagon like 60, 70 years ago.
This was the U.S. Weather Modification Bureau back in the day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, resounding results twofold. One, we didn't have much in the way of radar or satellite imagery, so it was hard to measure what the results were. But the premise was if you can precipitate enough water out of the hurricane and some other physics stuff that we don't have to get into the particulars of, then you could slow down the wind speeds, prevent flooding. Turns out, like I said before, we can make it rain a bit more. We can make it rain snow a bit more. You can't stop a hurricane with any of the tech that we have or that we've theorized about.
We can't strengthen a hurricane, weaken a hurricane, or reroute a hurricane.
Got none of that yet, but I'll let you know if we figure it out.
Okay, and we especially cannot create a hurricane out of thin
0%. 0% okay. Can you create a hurricane?
So that's the hurricane thing. So so far we had that project. It didn't really. By the way, that silver iodide. What was the intention of silver iodide? What was the hope that silver iodide could do if you dropped it inside a hurricane?
So silver iodide is what we use right now in our programs for precipitation enhancement to bring water to farms and to bring water to data centers, factories, etc. The way that it works is its crystal structure is almost identical to ice. So when you disperse it into the cloud, water freezes onto it, grows into big snowflakes that have the same crystal structure, and then they precipitate. If it's warm beneath the cloud, it melts into rain. If it's cold, it stays as snow. Point worth making is that safe? Are you going to pollute everything and poison us with silver iodide? And resounding answer is no. It is about as safe per gram as table salt. Now, that being said, if you eat half a kilogram of it, like you probably shouldn't eat half a kilogram of table salt either, or aspirin. But the more important thing to say is we use about 50 grams over 100,000 acres at a time. So there's a million times less that we disperse than's already naturally in U.S. soil. So it's way less than would be consequential.
Right. I mean, that was a big question we got, which is the pollutant effect here, both for drinking water and soil. If we were to start to do cloud seeding on a frequent basis, what would it actually mean to our groundwater?
It would be just the same and perfectly fine. For every gram, or for every pound of silver iodide that you put up over these hundreds of thousands of acres, you get about 40 million pounds of water down. So it's radically diluted, and it's significantly less than is already naturally occurring in soil in the U.S.
Got it. Another thing that comes up is chemtrails. Where do chemtrails fall into this mix of the dictionary of what's happening up in the skies?
I think the thing that there's contrails, which are plumes of steam that is frozen that come from airplane jets. Chemtrails are supposedly contrails with additional poison to control your mind or something. Um,
Right.
and I think the important point to make is whether chemtrails are real or not. I personally haven't seen enough evidence to be convinced that they are. If you see what you think is a chemtrail, it has nothing to do with cloud seeding. Cloud seeding, like I said before, you need a big puffy cloud full of water, those long streaky things in the sky. Whether they're natural or not, I think that they are. They can't make it rain more.
And so when you do your business up there with your drones, is it all drones or is it planes as well?
We have a couple planes for old school programs, but those have all been phased out, or they all will be phased out in the next month or so.
So is there, like, as a person, standing here on the ground, like, can I see evidence that that cloud has been impacted or that you're trying to impact said cloud?
Nope, looks the same. Well, you can see on radar, but if you just look with your eyes, it looks the same as any other cloud that's snowing or raining.
Got it. And what is the process like in terms of identifying, okay, geographically, what area needs rain? How early do you need to get to those clouds? How are you watching the forecast? Take us through, Augustus, your process.
Yeah, totally. So we have a team of meteorologists at Rainmaker. They're looking at the large scale forecast over, the entire Pacific Northwest or the entire Rockies. If there is a cloud system coming through, then we'll start taking observations with all of our radar. So we build our own radar to measure the conditions in the cloud. If we measure that there's lots of liquid in the cloud, then we'll deploy a team to launch the drones. They'll fly the drones up. Generally, they're there a little bit beforehand so that as soon as the water's there, you can fly the drones up. That takes about 15 minutes. Then you disperse into the cloud, and it only takes 15 to 45 minutes for precipitation to occur after you've started dispersing from the drone. So you can see in real time what your effect is. And we'll use the same radar that we use to target the right conditions in cloud to measure how much precipitation we've made. So start to finish, you'll forecast about 7 days in advance. If you get a go signal, then you'll make observations with the radar, deploy a team, fly into cloud. About 2 hours later, you have rain on the ground.
And how precise can you be by the mile? Like, if you're trying to hit a certain neighborhood or hit certain farmland, how many miles off are you? And how early? I mean, do you have to be like, okay, the winds are going at 15 miles per hour, which means the cloud is moving 15 miles per hour, which means we're going to hit them this many minutes out. What's the precision level these days?
Yeah, so if you have a neighbor that you don't particularly like, you can't make it rain on their house.
Okay,
Sorry
you're
to
not
say.
there yet.
Yeah. We target entire watersheds. So think of the size of like an entire city, or the entire watershed that flows into a dam. We're talking about like 10 by 10-ish square miles.
What about when you see in the forecast, oh, this is going to be a blizzard, or this is going to be like a major rain event? Does that immediately, do you guys say, like, we're not touching this?
Yeah, bingo. I don't want to do that because, we're trying to maximize as much water as we can get on the ground while keeping everybody safe. But two, we're not allowed to. All of our permits with all of the states in which we operate require that we have suspension criteria, which means if there's a risk of avalanche, if there's a risk of flooding, if there's too much water in the reservoirs already, even if our customers want us to make more water, we're not allowed to. And so, yeah, no, we won't just wantonly blast.
And that's regulating yourselves, or that's the state has imposed certain restrictions on you?
The states have imposed those regulations, which is what I wish Florida had done, by the way, because they had the option to keep the regulation on the books, which was from the 60s, that required you have all of these safety measures, which required the state approve the material that you were using. But they just banned it wholesale. So how many states still have it on the books? About 30.
30. And how many states are you actively working with right now?
Colorado, California, Idaho, Oregon, Texas. 5. I don't think I'm missing anything. 5.
And what is the competitive environment right now? How many companies is Rainmaker competing against? And do you guys work together? Are there different technologies? What is happening above our heads these days?
It's really kind of just us.
Okay.
Now, for context, there's a couple of old school operations that fly a plane into a cloud, don't take much in the way of measurement, don't do a lot of sophisticated targeting. They don't know exactly how much water they're producing. That's the old school way of doing it. They're kind of being phased out. The real dynamic is this. There's Rainmaker, which is taking the best research from American universities and European universities, and then the CCP and the Chinese Meteorological Administration. Like right now in Riyadh and in the Emirates, in Thailand, all countries that have active precipitation enhancement programs, it's kind of us versus the Chinese Meteorological Administration.
It's so interesting because, I mean, we talk about the competitiveness with the Chinese on so many levels. The tariffs have been all the talk. There's concern about the extent to which we depend on the Chinese for our pharmaceuticals and our steel and our computer chips. And, it's fascinating hearing you talk about this technology, which again, I think the knee jerk from so many people that I talk to about this is like, I don't know. That sort of like makes me nervous overall. But what you're saying is what should make us nervous is not being engaged in this technology right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll also say, aside from the concerns about pollution, which we addressed earlier, totally safe to use silver iodide.
Well, and by the way, just one follow up on that, and then I'll let you continue. Have you done follow up testing on the ground to ensure that, like in the areas that you're actively working, that you're testing the groundwater and the soil and all of that?
So from historic operations, because the state of Utah has been doing it for decades, we have 30 to 80 years of data on all of these regions, and it's almost immeasurably low. Like it's a million times less additional silver in the soil and in the water than what's already naturally occurring. So we'll continue to do studies. We just wrapped up our first season of operation, but the trend is going to be, and we'll continue to recapitulate this to people, that there's no adverse ecological or agricultural or human impacts. But to your previous point, a lot of people's reaction is like, seems strange to be modifying the weather. And aside from the pollution stuff, aside from the fact that I think American farmers should have as much water as possible and that American ecosystems should be as green and lush as possible, aside from even the competition with China, part of what inspired me to start Rainmaker was Genesis 1:26. So I didn't grow up Christian. I converted when I was 20, or I grew up an atheist. And in Genesis 1:26, very beginning of the Bible, God gives man dominion over the earth, the seas, and the skies, and everything therein. And he tells us to steward the creation that we've been given. As far as I can tell, as long as there are droughts and people are suffering from that, as long as ecosystems are dying because of that, and we have the means to steward creation better, we should. And so cloud seeding, it's not something that should be done wantonly. It should be regulated. But why would we say no to a technology that can save ecosystems and save farms and save cities that are otherwise going to die from drought? I don't think that that's, in line with the mandate that God gave us in Genesis.
We making some Bible references here because, I mean, certainly the pushback for some people will be like, well, the weather is what the weather is. The weather is what God intends the weather to be. And so if, the higher powers decided that this land will now become drought ridden and become a desert, and this, other area will become lush, so be it.
Sure, but God put us on Earth. That doesn't mean that we should never go to the moon or Mars, right? Like he made us so that we would be creative and ambitious, and generative and productive. And so I think that it's part of the image of God within us to work to make the world better and to expand and to be more abundant.
What's the most popular question you get? I mean, beyond what is cloud seeding from folks, what are some of the questions that you want answered out there, or like the biggest misconception about what it is that you do?
Yeah. I think the first point is, probably stop trying to dim the sun.
So there's a conflation that people conflate a variety of things.
So people mix up chemtrails, solar radiation modification, and cloud seeding. So for context, cloud seeding, invented in the United States, localized water production technology with 80 years of data on how safe it is, something that the Chinese have invested heavily in, that I would prefer American farmers and American companies and American governments benefit from. Solar radiation modification, very new technology, geoengineering, attempting to cool the entire planet, untested largely, and would have effects for years. That, I think, is something that should be really heavily scrutinized, and Lee Zeppelin at the EPA is doing that right now. And then there's chemtrails, whether they exist or not what I need to prove. I'm totally open if people have evidence of them existing, but I just haven't gotten that yet.
We've been talking a lot about China and the U.S. What is your biggest concern when it comes to the national security implications for the U.S.? What is the case that you're making right now, state officials to federal officials to folks around the world, when it comes to national security and water?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of people talk about energy right now and how energy, nuclear energy, coal, clean natural gas is fundamental to making everybody's lives better, to driving the economy. I think water is just the same. So if we look domestically at state governments, at the federal government, like Phoenix, Arizona, Las Vegas, Salt Lake City, Utah, Los Angeles, all of these cities, Dallas, Texas, even, all of these cities are going to become uninhabitable if we don't produce more water, right? Like the American West is going to collapse.
How soon are we talking?
Over the course of the next few decades. And that's fundamentally
because, really? So like even by the year 2100, we're saying?
Yeah. So like Phoenix, Arizona has banned new housing development in certain neighborhoods because there's not enough water to supply them. Like that is a very real problem. The Colorado River doesn't even make it down to Mexico anymore because we take so much water out of it already. The Salt Lake is drying up to the tune of like a meter per year. All of these cities that are like made of Americans, just the same as any cities on the East Coast, they're not going to be well off in
and by the way, we've seen, and these are cities that have seen huge population growth in the past couple decades.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Population growth, economic growth, agricultural production. So I think domestically, right, like if you care about making America as lush and abundant and productive as possible, if you want everybody to have the highest quality of life, if you want it to be greener, I've got like this hat here from the American Conservation Coalition.
Make America Beautiful Again. He's wearing, everyone, for everyone who's listening, not watching on YouTube, he has a green Make America Beautiful Again hat. What was that?
MABA, exactly. Like if you want the country to be lush and abundant, then cloud seeding is the way to produce as much water as cost effectively as possible. Internationally, we see the Chinese Belt and Road program, right? They're trying to build all of the infrastructure and own all of the infrastructure in Africa and the Middle East so that they have leverage over all these countries.
This is the Chinese program, upwards of 100 countries around the world, where they've effectively loaned all these countries money or built infrastructure. In many cases, they want that money back, sometimes with interest, but they have heavily invested in a lot of developing countries.
Yeah, and that's not to say that I think the US government's perfect, right? Like far from it. But if I have to choose between an authoritarian communist government owning all of the infrastructure and leverage and via cloud seeding the water supply in these countries, or like an American company that's regulated by the American government with American employees, I choose the latter case 100 times out of 100.
Are you guys getting any funding right now from the federal government? Are you seeking funding, or are you guys going to stay completely private?
Right now, our customers are state and municipal governments. We don't get any funding from the federal government as it stands, but the Colorado River impacts multiple states. Producing more water over all of the Colorado River would benefit all of the states in the West. And so we're talking to people in the federal government about making more water and funding cloud seeding research and operations.
You're talking about the Southwest here, and we'll close up this conversation in a second. But curious, I mean, as somebody who is steeped in these issues, and we, most people were very familiar with climate change. We're seeing, areas that never got rain, getting rain, areas that used to get rain, not getting rain, areas like the Pacific Northwest, where you didn't need an air conditioner in the summer. You now need an air conditioner in Seattle. What is the sense, and do you have any numbers on the percentage of American territory that is now headed towards desertification or drought? I mean, how stark is what's happening when it comes to climate change in the U.S. right now?
I think something that is like representative, right, is the Ogallala Aquifer. Have you ever heard of this before?
No, where is that?
So it's this aquifer that runs from the Dakotas all the way down to Texas. And so everything from, about Colorado west up until the Mississippi east. That whole band of the Great Plains, all reliant on the water from the Ogallala and the rain to recharge the water from the Ogallala. that aquifer's cooked, right? We got 50 years best before there's no water in there anymore. A bunch of places in Texas have already run dry. If we don't produce more water, and you can't do it with desalination in the interior of the country, then the American breadbasket collapses. All of those cities again collapse, and everybody has to move to the coast. And so if you live in Nebraska and you don't want to move to California or Seattle or New York, then you should probably find a way to produce more water, and cloud seeding is the best one.
Yeah, I mean, and this is some of the most fertile farmland in the world that we're very lucky to have in the U.S. But sounds like the next few decades are going to be a key there. One thing you brought up a few times here, Augustus, is desalination. What is the state of desalination, as in taking salt water and making it fresh water? Because you mentioned you're working in California. I was like, well, that's a coastal state. Shouldn't they be like very ahead on desalination and not need you because they have this whole ocean next to them?
Well, so I love desal. I think it's great. I think that we should do lots of desal, especially if we have more nuclear energy and can make energy free. But the problem with desal is once you get it from the ocean, you got to move that water inland, right? And so I don't know if you've ever carried like water jugs before. If you have to carry water jugs 100 miles, it's probably going to cost a lot. It's probably going to take a lot of energy, power, maintenance. Like the California water project, it uses 13% of all of the electricity in the state. That's just moving water around. And that's only in California. You can't even get this water to Nevada. You can't push it over the Rockies. You can't push it into the Central Valley. And so even though desal is great, it only works on the coasts.
And it sounds like even then, California still can't fulfill all of its needs via desal.
Yeah. I mean, it's not right now, right? Like the California state water supply strategy explicitly plans for 1 million acres of farmland to dry up in the next 5 years. What you can do is you can increase snowpack in the mountains, increase precipitation in the spring and fall, increase rain, and then let all that water run off and run down. And importantly, desalinated water, what's that translate to? It's about, let's take a cubic meter. Sorry, I'm in Riyadh, so I'm thinking in terms of metric.
No, it's okay. Yeah, we're one of the last. It's like us in Liberia left with that don't use the metric system.
Yeah. So a cubic meter of water. So think 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. That costs about 40 cents. From cloud seeding, it's about a tenth of a cent. So not only can you produce it in regions where you can't do desal because there's no ocean, but it's way more cost effective too.
As we've seen the sort of surge in wildfires, especially in California, we watch what happened in Southern California. Are you guys ever called in those like kind of breaking news emergency situations to like help with that?
So you need a cloud to exist in order to cloud seed, right? Oftentimes when there are these wildfires, it's because there's no clouds at all. However, wildfire prevention is something that the state of California and other states absolutely could be doing from enhancing rain before, right? So a lot of the time what you'll see is months will go by without rain, but there's clouds full of water right overhead. And so if California, if LA was cloud seeding throughout the year to keep the ground more moist, more green, less dry, then there would be far less wildfire risk. And we're talking to the state about doing that now.
Augustus, I want to thank you. It is late where you're at in Riyadh, but thanks for chatting with us, giving us a sense of what Rainmaker does, hopefully clarifying a lot of the questions many of you have asked me over the last couple of years. And I rest assured, I think, Augustus, this is going to be one of these conversations that I am promoting over and over and over again as various theories circulate on social media and things happen. And so I hope that this will be very helpful. And if not, we'll have you back again.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man.
All right, an update here, everybody. We taped this conversation a few weeks before that deadly flooding in Texas that took so many lives. It turns out there have been accusations from some folks on the far right, including Congressman Marjorie Taylor Greene, asking whether Rainmaker and its cloud seeding may have been one of the factors that led to the record flooding in Texas. Well, as you just listened to in this podcast, he pushes back on those allegations about what cloud seeding can actually do. But Doricko actually did do a few media appearances in the aftermath of the flooding in Texas. I want to play a clip for you on how he's responding to those allegations specific to Texas here. Here's a bit of an appearance that he did recently with Fox News host Will Cain, talking about those allegations and the reality of what took place in Texas. Here's a bit of what Will Kane had to ask him and Doricko's response.
This is a very emotional moment. People are upset. Children, hundreds, died. The question is whether or not Rainmaker, cloud seeding on July 2nd, contributed to storms that occurred on July 4th. Did it enhance? Did it intensify what we saw some 36 to 48 hours later?
Unequivocally, our cloud seeding operations on July 2nd did not impact the flooding that occurred later. And that said, my heart and prayers are still with all of the people of Texas and all the families that have been affected. It was a tragedy. But in cloud seeding on the 2nd, one, we are regulated by the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation, and we have what are called suspension criteria, where if there are National Weather Service flash flood warnings or severe storm warnings, then we cannot operate in those areas per the restrictions and regulations we have. Our meteorologists actually proactively suspended operations a day before the National Weather Service issued a flash flood warning. So we were ahead of the curve there. And then even so, the precipitation that we induced, right, like the very best operations can produce tens of millions of gallons of precipitation over hundreds of square miles. That is de minimis relative to the remnants of the tropical storm that came in and dumped trillions of gallons of precipitation.
So you were able to produce, in short, something like this much rain, less than a centimeter of rain, and the flood itself, the storms themselves, it filled up a 20-foot pond, an Olympic-sized pool, 20 inches of rain. Mm-hmm. And so your argument is, if anything, we contributed the tiniest bit. I want to end with one somewhat scientific but skeptical question that I think you're ready to answer. I've listened to hours and hours of your content and read about Rainmaker. And the question is the silver iodide that you put into the atmosphere localized to one cloud capable of remaining in the air and as a new storm system moves in, supercharging that storm system? Could that have happened in Texas?
So supercharging, no, absolutely not. Remaining in the atmosphere, no, not that either. When you seed the clouds themselves, when you disperse the silver iodide into it, and then it precipitates, that aerosol, that particulate precipitates down and out within the course of hours. Now, if you were to just disperse aerosol into open air, then it could persist longer. But one, we were seeding clouds rather than dispersing it just in the open atmosphere. And two, any amount that would have remained in the ensuing days and hours from our operation would have been so radically diffuse that it have been lower in concentration than just the background dust.
So it either produces rain within an hour or two, or it dissipates within, I've heard you say, something like 12 to 20 hours, meaning some 36 to 48 hours, once the storm moves into Texas, your silver iodide would no longer be part of the equation?
No, not at all.
All right, again, that was Doricko responding to the most recent allegations after we taped our interview over on Fox News regarding all things Texas. I appreciate all of you for listening, and I will see you back here again soon.